Happy Father's Day, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 5 summary, playtest number 5 of the Global War 1939 series. Just a little correction, CB's Bill pointed out the US was not at war last turn, so the Canadians that disembarked in Hawaii would not have been able to do that, so they would have remained on the transport, they would have been safe. And also the Americans would not have been able to annex Baja in Mexico. So they would have done it this turn, so I just left the pieces where they were. And just a little correction there, just to point out. So what happened this turn while the Americans left the Line Islands? Actually, these guys are here. The Australian New Zealand aircraft flew from the carrier and from New Zealand and landed in the line. And the reason they did that is because the Japanese went into the Carolines, which they have a naval base there. Because they are now out of position of Australia with the British produced 2 destroyers and 2 submarines. So they're starting to build up a small navy. The Japanese took the Philippines because the opportunity was there. That fortification is gone. The Japanese also didn't want to branch too far out into India, and that is because you've got this naval transports and small navy happening here from Cairo. The Japanese took a pot shot. They killed the Lend-Lease tank and a couple infantry here in Sichuan. It was mutual destruction. The Japanese attacked with 1 infantry and a large air force, and they lost 1 plane and a dude. So just trying to weather the KMT down. And the KMT actually, they didn't actually have a turn last turn. They forgot. So we're just going to do what they've got, a couple guys. So they are just going to put them all right here. So they would have been able to produce 3 guys. So that's what's happening there, and these guys probably would have backed up. That guy would have backed up there, and there you go. So the CCP did nothing other than they plunked 3 guys down ready to counterattack. The Japanese took back Manchuria, and they built a couple destroyers and 3 submarines. The Americans over here built a battleship, a cruiser, and I think 3 submarines and a transport with a couple Marines. They were able to Lend-Lease. The Russians tried for 20 and half made it. So they Lend-Leased the Russians 10 IPP. The Americans also annexed Brazil. They built a couple destroyers here off of just south of Washington. That's a safe territory. And the Germans are convoying the British for 3 IPP here. And the Canadians and the British built a couple more ships. The Germans built a couple destroyers. Down here in Africa, the British are building up. They built a Lancaster bomber in Cairo, and they've got, I think it's 3 naval transports there, so they want to take a poke at Tobruk next turn. There is now, I think it's about 9 infantry there. Over here on the Eastern Front, which was probably the area most affected last turn in terms of what's happening in the game. Currently, the Germans are sitting here with this pile with the Italians over here in Orlik Kursk, and they are outnumbered by the Russians, who are sitting in Moscow with about 71 total units, and currently the Germans and the Italians have about 60 something. So not enough to take it yet. It's a bit of a stalemate happening. However, some good. The Italians can open in Kharkov, so next turn the Germans, if they want, can go and capture Stalingrad. Now in behind this big stack of Germans is a whole bunch of more armor on its way. You've got Stugs, you've got SS Panzer Grenadiers, regular armor, and the Panzer IVs, which attack and defend at 7. And behind that, they built their first Panzer V, which that's also a heavy tank, and you've got a whole bunch of more fast movers coming in behind it. And Moscow is now somewhat surrounded by the Germans who are coming in, although they still hold on to Smolensk. The Italians were able to capture Kiev. And so that was the highlights of round 5. The British, they've got a military base in Tehran. They've got another one in here in Upper Egypt and another one here in Rhodesia. So they are building as many units in Africa as they can. They want to thwart the Japanese from coming across, but also have enough units to keep pressure and eventually take Tobruk and maybe get into Turkey. So it's a race for Moscow right now. And the next turn, the Japanese, actually they have, I forgot to put them on the board, but they've got another 8 units to jump on these transports next turn. So I will put those on the board, and so I would imagine Amur and slowly the Japanese, they're trying a little bit of a different strategy. The Japanese don't really need to push too far inland. They need to capture the victory cities and hold on to them and just keep the KMT and the CCP and the Russians at bay while continuing to build navy and keep pressure on the Americans. So we'll see what happens here. The Japanese do have a bit of a navy down here. They've got a repaired battleship, a couple destroyers, and an escort carrier, but it's no match for this down here. So that is it for round 5, and stay tuned for round 6.